On the evening of July 20th, 2025, at approximately 7:45 p.m., the Los Angeles Police Department's Devonshire Patrol Division received a radio call concerning an assault with a deadly weapon suspect, reportedly armed with a firearm. The call directed officers to the 20,000 block of Prairie Street, a residential and commercial corridor where pedestrian and vehicle traffic remained active into the evening hours. Given the nature of the call and the reported presence of a firearm, responding units approached with heightened caution. As patrol officers were arriving in the area, an LAPD air unit reached the location first, providing a strategic aerial advantage. From above, air support quickly located the suspect, who was riding a skateboard and attempting to flee the area. The suspect was visually observed moving away from Prairie Street and traveling toward nearby blocks. The air crew communicated real-time updates to ground units, guiding them toward the suspect's path of travel. The individual was soon identified as 28-year-old Romario Iraheta. The aerial unit continued tracking his movement as he made his way to the 9300 block of Corbin Avenue. This rapid relocation required officers on the ground to shift positions accordingly, adapting their approach to intercept Iraheta before he could disappear into the surrounding streets or pose a threat to civilians. Once officers reached Corbin Avenue, Iraheta continued fleeing despite their presence. His refusal to stop or comply heightened tensions, as officers needed to detain him in connection with the assault with a deadly weapon report. The airborne unit provided continuous vectoring information, ensuring officers maintained visual contact with Iraheta as he traveled on his skateboard through the area. The encounter quickly transitioned from a search to an active pursuit. Officers prepared for the possibility that Iraheta might still be armed, given the original call and the air unit's observation of his attempt to flee immediately upon being located. This set the stage for a rapidly evolving situation, one that would escalate significantly as Iraheta's actions became more aggressive and dangerous. The combination of the initial ADW report, the suspect's attempt to escape, and his movement across multiple blocks created an urgent need for ground units to intercept him as safely as possible. The next moments would define the escalation of the encounter and lead to the critical confrontation that followed. As officers arrived at the 9300 block of Corbin Avenue, the situation shifted rapidly. The suspect, 28-year-old Romario Iraheta, abandoned his skateboard and immediately transitioned into a full sprint on foot. What began as a mobile attempt to escape suddenly became a foot pursuit through a residential and commercial stretch of the neighborhood. This abrupt change heightened the urgency for responding officers, who now had to chase a suspect believed to be armed while ensuring the safety of anyone nearby. Officers issued clear verbal commands as they ran, identifying themselves repeatedly and ordering Iraheta to stop and surrender. Their commands were loud enough to be heard across the block, but Iraheta showed no indication of complying. Instead, he continued weaving through the area, forcing officers to stay close and maintain control of the unfolding situation while dealing with a potentially armed and unpredictable suspect. Moments later, the situation escalated dramatically. While officers were only a short distance behind him, Iraheta looked back, raised a firearm, and pointed it directly at the pursuing officers. This action created an immediate, life-threatening threat. The movement was unmistakable. An armed suspect turning toward officers with a gun in hand. In that instant, the potential for serious injury or death became imminent. There was no time for additional negotiation, no opportunity for extended de-escalation, and no margin for error. The act alone made it clear that the suspect intended to use deadly force. In response, officers acted in accordance with established department protocol. An officer-involved shooting, OIS, occurred as multiple rounds were discharged to stop Iraheta from firing the weapon at them. The purpose of their response was to neutralize the threat and prevent harm to the officers or anyone else in the area. Iraheta was struck by gunfire, but the impact did not immediately immobilize him. Instead, he continued to run for a short distance, still demonstrating mobility and leaving officers uncertain about whether he remained capable of using the firearm. Despite being wounded, Iraheta eventually slowed down. Within moments, he came to a stop. Officers approached with extreme caution, aware that the firearm was still within reach and that the suspect had already displayed a willingness to use it. They issued commands for him to show his hands, move away from the weapon, and surrender. At this stage, Iraheta complied, allowing officers to safely transition from pursuit to apprehension. Once Iraheta was in custody, officers immediately shifted from tactical response to life-saving efforts. Recognizing the urgency of his injury, they called for paramedics and began administering first aid while maintaining scene security. Officers worked to control bleeding, stabilize his condition, and ensure he remained conscious and responsive until emergency medical personnel arrived. Their actions during this phase reflected the standard protocol of providing medical assistance even to suspects who have just posed a deadly threat. Near the area where Iraheta was detained, officers recovered the firearm he had pointed at them, a black steel handgun equipped with a high-capacity magazine and loaded with live rounds. The weapon's condition and location confirmed the deadly threat officers had faced during the chase. Its recovery also marked an essential step in preserving evidence for the investigation that would follow. Despite the seriousness of the confrontation, the rapid escalation, and the presence of an armed suspect actively threatening officers, the incident concluded without injuries to the pursuing officers or any members of the community. The swift response, adherence to protocol, and coordinated tactics prevented further harm and ensured the situation ended with the public's safety intact. Once officers ensured the scene was safe and Iraheta was fully secured, medical personnel were cleared in to continue treatment. Paramedics arrived and took over the medical response, evaluating Iraheta's injuries and stabilizing him for transport. He was then taken to a local hospital for further evaluation. Despite being struck by gunfire, Iraheta remained in stable condition, and medical staff confirmed that his injuries were not life-threatening. Following medical transport, officers began establishing a perimeter to secure the area for investigators. Detectives, crime scene technicians, and supervisory personnel arrived shortly afterward to begin documenting the incident. Their responsibilities included reconstructing the exact timeline, confirming the sequence of events, and gathering every piece of physical evidence associated with the OIS. The black steel handgun, complete with a high-capacity magazine and live ammunition, was photographed and collected. The weapon's location was recorded relative to where Iraheta had paused during the pursuit and where officers had engaged him. Because Iraheta was absentee booked for assault with a deadly weapon on a police officer with a firearm, the recovered handgun became critical evidence in the investigation. Investigators also reviewed body-worn camera footage from the officers involved. The footage captured the chase, the commands issued, and the moment Iraheta pointed the firearm at officers, which prompted the OIS. Witness statements were collected from nearby residents and pedestrians who observed segments of the pursuit or heard gunfire. Their accounts helped support the officers' reports and further clarified the events leading up to Iraheta's capture. Meanwhile, officers involved in the pursuit were individually assessed to ensure none had sustained any injuries during the confrontation. Standard protocol required supervisors and medical personnel to check for physical harm, as well as the effects of adrenaline and stress following a high-risk, fast-moving incident. Despite the suspect pointing a loaded firearm at pursuing officers and running through an active, populated area, the assessment confirmed that no officers had been hurt. Likewise, no community members were injured at any point during the encounter. As the investigation proceeded, all evidence consistently pointed to the same sequence of events. Iraheta had attempted to flee from officers, first on a skateboard and then on foot. After the suspect was taken into custody, treated for his injuries, and transported for additional medical care, investigators conducted a full review of the scene. Once photographs, measurements, and evidence collection were completed, the area was formally reopened to normal activity, bringing closure to a high-risk incident that, despite its volatility, ended without loss of life.